Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to one of our final live sessions of TMC Online. My name is Julie Russell, and I'm here to open the session on more support for workshop apprentices. So this session, we're going to have a look at some of the major issues facing Australia with its shortage of apprentices and some of the schemes in place to help us improve and upskill people so that they can get into the apprenticeship scheme and stay in the apprenticeship scheme, and what support the Australian government can offer employers through their wage subsidy process to enable that. And here to talk to us today about that is Sally Harris. Sally Harris is the Transport Industry Employment Liaison Officer with the Commonwealth Department of Education, Skills and Employment. Her role includes working with employers and peak industry bodies on workforce planning and development, including brokering labour solutions using government incentives and programs. As well as working with larger organisations on pipeline projects, Sally works with smaller employers to co-design and trial bespoke or innovative industry-led pilots to inform future government policy. So before I welcome Sally, I just want to remind everybody that in this presentation, Sally is going to be asking your opinion on a few things. And she's going to do that through using our polling feature, which is located on the far right-hand side of your screen in the chat feature. And I encourage you to participate in the polling and also leave your questions in the chat feature, which we'll be able to ask Sally at the end of her presentation. But no further ado, welcome Sally. I'll leave it to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Julie. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Look, you've totally stolen my thunder in terms of my introduction and done a much better job than I normally would. So, look, as Julie mentioned, we're called the ELOs, the Employee Liaison Officers, with Education, Skills and Employment. There's about 13 of us around the country, and we're all focused on specific industries. So my interest is transport and logistics, and obviously there's a fair bit of crossover with manufacturing and other industries as well. So wonderful to be here. As Julie mentioned, I'm going to take you through a bit of a brief overview of the funding and supports that are currently available. And then at the end, I think what I wanted to do was just have a brief discussion about some of the things that we really need to consider in terms of the labour force at the moment, and what I've been hearing from employers as I'm out and about. So as Julie said, we'll have the polls going as well, and that's a great source of information, but I also would love to hear your views when we get to that question time at the end. I'm not going to do a long and involved presentation. I'm not an expert in all of the funding. I'm very happy to admit that. So if you've got questions and I can't answer them, happy to take those on notice and get back to you with any questions, or get back to the ATA who can disseminate them on behalf of everybody. So I will load up my little PowerPoint slide now for you. And I'm hoping you'll be able to see that now. All righty. So I think we've got a first poll over there, just to give it a little test run. If you go over to the right-hand side of the screen and see the little icon there that looks like a graph or a chart, there should be an initial question there, which is, are you currently looking to employ an apprentice or trainee? I'm just going to see myself if I can watch
Just
your
wait a few
answers
seconds.
as
I think it's coming up now.
All right. There we go. Excellent. So feel free to click away over there, and we'll see what comes through, and we'll knock on to the next slide. Oh, there we go. Oh, now my little poll
So,
thing.
Sally, I can see the poll at the moment. We're currently, well, I think we need a few more votes in there, everybody, but currently looking at 100%
Yeah.
yes.
Yes, well, that's great. That works very well. All right, so here we go. We'll start with a quick overview of the federal funding incentives. So I'm assuming that a lot of people will be familiar with the Boosting Apprenticeships commencement funding. And essentially, as you can see here, you can access a wage subsidy of up to 28,000 over a year's period for taking on a new or recommencing apprentice or trainee. Obviously, there's eligibility rules around those, and I've included a Q&A sheet in an info pack that I think Emily has kindly attached to this info session. So all of the links and things that or contacts that I discussed today will be included in there for you at the end. Um, now, the other thing I think to keep in mind is that in anything to do with federal funding, essentially talk to an ASIN. So uh, that's really important because the eligibility is very individual to your business. So they can guide you to other potential incentives. There's the additional identified skill shortages payment. There's support for adult apprentices as well. And there's also things like payments for people with a disability or people who live in rural and regional locations. So there's often, more than one incentive that might be applicable to your business, and that's what those ASINs are there for, is to, help you find out what's good for you. So I think we've got our second poll question up there, which is, have you heard of or used the BAC incentive? So if you've got a moment to, I think we've got 2 yeses. Is that right, Julie?
I have, at the moment, we've got about 6 votes, so we're waiting for some more votes to come
Ah,
in, but 67% yes, 33%
oh,
no.
oh yeah, mine must have a little lag on it. That's all right. I'll count on you for the poll results.
I can help facilitate that.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Because I would have thought that everyone had heard of it, and it's fantastic. If you haven't heard of it, this is probably one of the reasons we've had such a big increase in apprenticeship commencements over the last few quarters. We've seen, I think, about 140% jump in apprenticeship take up. So that's good news for people who are looking for apprentices, and obviously a very good incentive to be able to tap into if you're, in a situation where you're not sure either way whether it's going to be worthwhile for your business. Okay. So that was the federal funding that we just covered, that's attached to my department. In terms of state funding for apprentices, there's also a lot of things available at the moment. I guess I just want to make you aware of those. Again, it's outside of my remit in my role, but I think it's just really good to be aware that there's other funding and supports available. So the state incentives could range across payroll, tax rebates, small business grants, insurance reduction, free assistance with recruitment and travel and accommodation allowances. Again, I would suggest that the ASIN is the best place to start and discuss what you're eligible for. But I always recommend to people have a look around and see what's available in advance, because particularly at the moment, with so many incentives being available, it can be a bit of a messy space even for the people who are working on the front line. So, do a few Googles, make yourself familiar with what's available in your area. Um, and yes, there are instances whereby you can sometimes tap into both federal and state government incentives for the same employee or the same business circumstances. So it's good to know that there's both available out there. So I think we've got the third one, the third poll up. Have you recently accessed any state funding or supports to assist in recruiting new staff? And I will, while you're having a look at that, flip to the next slide. So this next one, just talking about federal and state funding to support specific cohorts. So this is funding available to support you in bringing on new employees. And again, these differ depending on your location and your specific organisation's eligibility. So in some of these cases here in these examples, that'll equate to a wage subsidy of around $20,000, but it's all very sort of flexible and personal circumstance based. So just another thing to be aware of when you are recruiting staff. And you might be particularly looking at people from within your region, or you might even know someone who, I've heard stories from employers where they might know a mature age person who is really keen to pivot into some sort of new role, but need a little bit of extra support there. So they might use that funding that they get through the government to give them a little bit of additional training or mentorship along the way. So we've got our fourth poll question coming up now, I think, which is, have you ever applied for a government wage subsidy for one of those cohorts up there on the screen?
Now, just say, Sally, while everyone's
Yeah.
doing a vote on that, it looks like most people aren't aware of access, or they haven't recently accessed state funding to support or assist in the recruitment of their staff.
Mm. And that's really interesting. I mean, one of the things I'd love to unpack at the end, I would say that red tape is one of the things I hear most often, that there's a bit of an administrative burden with applying for subsidies. And I'd be really interested to know if that's a common theme amongst people watching today. But, if there's other reasons that come to mind straight away about why people aren't tapping into it, I'd really like to hear your feedback at the end. Be very, very interested to know. And feel free to be frank.
Yeah, well, I would encourage everyone to put some of their comments on the chat and we'll have a look through those in the meantime. The poll is coming up now. Have you ever applied for a government wage subsidy in any of the cohorts? So 67% yes have.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And another thing you might like to, mention if you're going to make some comments in the chat today are, are there ways that you've used your subsidy, innovative ways, or just general ideas for how you might use that subsidy potentially as an incentive to keep that person employed as well. That we've heard quite a lot of stories around that lately, and I'd be interested to know if that's something that this group could also share. Okay, move on to the next slide. Okay. There'll be another poll question coming up soon, which will be, have you ever used an employment services provider? So that's, you would know those as Job Active, Transition to Work is one, DES is one, Disability Employment Services. So I'd be really interested to know if anyone here today has used those government employment services to recruit staff before. So while we wait for that to come up, I just wanted to sort of have a brief chat around where we're at with respect to the current labour market. So, talking to employers and peak body representatives around the country in my day to day, I think, that some of the main messaging coming through right now is, we've had the most people in work now that we've had for a decade. And it really does feel like most people who generally want to work are in work. We've got a complete stall on international students and skilled migration. and there's a lot of difficulty in accessing a pool of available workers, and that's a national problem. That's what we're hearing. On the flip side, like I said before, those apprenticeship commencements have jumped. I think it's about 140% since December quarter last year, which is enormous. The biggest jump we've had in a decade, I think. And then some of the other things we're hearing, which is a little bit of a contrast point, is we're hearing from unemployed people their biggest difficulty in finding a job is too many applicants for available jobs. So, you know, we're still trying to unpack a little bit of that. If there's plenty of work available, but there's too many jobs available when an unemployed person is looking for work, is it that there's a lot of people applying for things? Is it that those unemployed people are applying for positions that aren't available to them? Is it that some professions people would prefer to work in over others, and therefore everybody's applying for certain positions? We're not really sure. So any of your feedback around that is also really, really helpful. And then one of the other things we hear a lot is insufficient work experience. So one of the things that we're really looking at quite closely in our department at the moment is how can we get across the hump of people not having enough experience. We hear it a lot from the youth cohort. What sort of supports and services can we put in place to help employers say yes to someone that they might usually say, oh, we just need them to have a little bit more experience before we put them out on the shop floor or whatever it might be. So some of the things that employers are telling us they can do under these current circumstances, I've just got a few ideas here that we've heard. So using the unemployment services to help you find workers, that's a free service. So, that's if that's something you haven't tapped into before, that could be a worthwhile avenue. There's still a lot of people looking for work in the caseload, and sometimes they're just not, they might need a little bit of assistance with confidence or something like that. Or sometimes they just are looking for a new opportunity in that might involve some available training or something. So there are a few options there. I guess probably one of the things we hear from employers is that, being able to put the time into that can be really a difficult balance, and we understand that. So we're keen to hear your feedback about how we can make that easier. But the other thing to know, if you haven't used employment services before, is that they can assist with, things like costs of training, costs of transport, even, clothing and things like that. So that, if you've got a new recruit, they might need some hard hat and boots and the clothes to make them work ready. So that's something that you can tap into. One of the things I've seen that's had a fair bit of success is employers collaborating in a group in particular regions, and working with their local employment services providers and tapping into funding through things like the employment facilitators. So the employment facilitators, I think there are 11 or 12 set up about 6 months ago around the country, and now there's going to be one in every employment region in the country within, I think, the next 3 or 4 months. So engaging with that local employment facilitator, if you're looking for staff, or even if you're shedding staff, it can be a really good way to get the movement happening. So the employment facilitators are there to kind of be a connection point for a local region. So they should have a really good idea of who's looking for staff and what kind of staff they're looking for. But then they also have very strong connections with the employment services providers and training organisations and so on. And they're there to try and help everybody join the dots, so to speak. Again, the details of how to find those will be in that information pack I mentioned earlier. I think, one of the other things is obviously getting in touch with your relevant state department to see if they've got any, place-based initiatives going on that you could tap into, funding or, um, you know, uh, local groups that might be talking about employment. I think that can be another really great source. And then when we're talking about, some of the things I've mentioned along the way today, just thinking about those wage subsidies and the kind of incentives that you can tap into from funding at the moment. Um, if you do have staff coming into your business that you might think, oh, they just need a little bit of help in this, that, or the other, maybe just considering how, can you bring a mentor in, or other sort of supports to just, there might be a few people out there that might just need that little bit of extra help to get up to speed just in the first instance. So that's just, something to think about. And then thinking about those more broadly, those attraction and retention strategies. So we're seeing a lot of businesses at the moment really thinking about how they can keep their people, because what appears to be happening is a lot of poaching in the system. Everybody's looking for the same kinds of people, and offering a couple of dollars more, can sometimes mean the difference between having a staff member or not having one. Well, thinking about how you can keep your employees loyal to your business, obviously, is one thing that's been high on the agenda for lots of employers I've been talking to. So, I feel like I've done a lot of talking, and I hope that's been helpful, particularly for people who haven't accessed government funding before. So, I might pop over to our last slide here, the little question page. Um, Julie, you've probably been keeping a really great eye on the polls over here. What can you tell us? Give us a little overview of what's happening over in the polls.
Well, over in the polls, just on the last question, really, do you use an employment service provider? I think it's a 60-40, so 60% no, don't use a service provider. And that's exactly the answer I gave. I, for one, weren't aware of some of them and didn't know there was a free service. And also, maybe I have a little bit of skepticism around it, and that just might be that sort of feeling that you go, oh, I don't know that I'm going to get somebody who wants to work if they're in unemployment. So that just might be a little bit of your own fears that aren't validated, because I think when I associate an unemployment service, it's for longer term, not necessarily somebody who is moving through and transitioning to a new job.
Yeah, yeah. And I think some of the other things that, it's just interesting conversations you have along the way. And for those of us who are, pretty often talking to and visiting people who are attempting to, transition out of employment services into the workforce, I think one of the messages I like to give back to employers is that there's just, there are different cohorts in there, but there's so many individual stories there. Some people have had an illness or a medical problem or something that has kept them out of work for a long time, but they're very, very keen to get back in. And it's just, it can be really difficult if they can't show on a resume a very strong work history. A lot of employers will, understandably say, oh, this doesn't really look so good, it's not for me. I'll choose this other candidate over here that looks like they've been working consistently for the last 10 years. Totally understandable. But there's just so much diversity in the caseload, and I think that's okay. We're in a position now, I suppose, where we can possibly make some positive changes that way, and it could be a great opportunity for some people who are very, very keen for full-time and long-term work to get that first foot in the door, just to say, hi, here I am and I'm really keen. So, and a lot of employers tell me that attitude is 90%. So that's I think looking on the positive, there's definitely a lot of people out there who just want that first chance. But
Yeah.
yes, totally understand, Julie. And just before I get rid of this slide here so I can see you again, I've put my details here. They're also in the info pack. I'm very happy to be contacted by anyone who, just wants to generally talk about employment for their business. If I can't help, I can certainly refer you to someone who can help in your situation. But I've also put this in the info pack. So if anyone's keen to have a chat, please do get in touch. So look, that's the end of my little PowerPoint there.
Well, thanks,
Why
Sally. We
don't
have
we
got
head over?
we've got a number of questions coming up. Sal, I'll go
Great.
through maybe from the beginning. So
Sure.
there is a question from Emily. Do you see the specific cohort funding as a pathway for employers to increase their workforce diversity? And then she asked what
Sorry,
my
Julie.
take is on it as well.
Sorry, Julie. I had a total blackout on my speaker then. Can you just repeat that one?
So, Sally, do you see the specific cohort funding as a pathway for employers to increase their workforce diversity?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's some great opportunities there. And in fact, some of the bigger employers are specifically using those incentives to bring through absolute cohorts and diversify large workforces. So, as you know, some of the large workforces are signed up to diversity targets, and they're using those quite effectively. Yeah.
I hadn't even realised that you could do it that way. And being aware of the funding, I think we talked about this earlier, just our level of awareness of the funding, even at a state level. I agree, the additional funding gives an employer, a small, medium, and even large size employer, the courage to try and expand the diversity pool. Where there might be some concerns, they have funding to help offset that. But the awareness of it has been, I guess, a bit lacking. And I certainly see by some of the comments, like Andy's come back and said that governments do announce incentives, but 95% of the time, when you read the fine print, you're not eligible. So one is an awareness issue, but two is the eligibility because of the fine print. And I guess people have agreed with that. And that makes it really difficult. It looks great on the surface, but underneath, it's just how it's hard to swim through all the complexities of it.
Totally agree, Andrew. I mean, it can be really difficult, and it's definitely absolutely individually business based. So sometimes you're not eligible. That's also, I think, probably the funding that's available at the moment is reflecting the circumstances we're under. I would say that, right now we're in a position, as an employer, you've never been in a better position to tap into funding, I would say. Especially in terms of bringing new people into your business and new jobs. So, eligibility wise, I would say make sure you get in touch with myself if you're not speaking to a trusted person in an ASIN or similar to discuss, because like I said previously, there's a lot of noise out there. It can be really, really hard to find what you're eligible for. And you might look at something and say, oh, this sounds great, perfect for my business. And then you get to the fine print and you're a bit disillusioned because you can't apply for it. But you might not even know there's something else that looks exactly the same that just has a slightly different edge that you could tap into. So please do get in touch if you see something and you think, well, this is what we could use, but there's this barrier in the way, and why? Like, tell us too. Say, why aren't we eligible for something like this? This would help us put X amount of people into work. Well, maybe there's some funding we can tap into. There's a little bit of flexible funding around at the moment as well, so that makes it a little bit easier for us to be more innovative in how we help.
Yeah, I certainly would say the current funding, in my opinion, has probably been easier to access in the boosting apprenticeship scheme than what it has in the past. For the additional, in terms of your diversity levels, I've had, when I've employed somebody, I've had them tell me after the fact I was eligible for some funding. Did I realise it? So they've communicated it to us. We don't even know beforehand. So I think there is a gap that when you employ somebody, there is no checks or filters to even know what to go through. So how would you recommend for an employer to really navigate that field? But I don't think you want everyone calling you. So is it better going through some of the training services that often deal in this space a lot, or is there a different way that we could use to navigate this?
Yeah, look, I think the ASINs are a good place to start. But if you feel like you're not getting traction, well, an ASIN or an employment service provider, there really should be someone within those businesses that can speak with you one-on-one and say, let's have a look at your business and what's appropriate for you. Look, I wonder, if that's the sentiment from everyone here. We just don't know what we're eligible for, and it's really hard to find out. Is that something that we feed back into government and we say, well, we need a portal. We need a portal where you can go in and you can say, I'm Julie, I've got this many staff, this is what I'm looking for. I want to hire these people and those people. Tell me what I can what I can access. Maybe there's something like that. I mean, harnessing technology to maybe make it a little bit easier might be a way that could be done. I mean, look, I just think making yourself aware of what's out there, and that's why I kind of wanted to cover today. We've got federal funding pieces, we've got state funding pieces, but then these employment facilitators, I think, might be a very good place to tap into now that they're rolling out across the regions, and because they're place based, and they'll have these local jobs councils as well. Get on a local jobs council, I say, and then you'll know exactly what's happening because you'll be talking to that EF all the time, and you can be directly in contact with them and getting them to help you design something that's appropriate for your business.
Right. Sally, I was interested, I guess when I saw this session, it was about apprentices, and I just solely thought my brain down the apprentice pathway. But it's also for trainees or traineeships, is that correct?
Yeah.
And do you is it a certain type of traineeship, or if we had employed people in the transport as a transport operator for a trainee there, would they be eligible for this government funding?
I am pretty sure it covers all apprenticeship and traineeships. I could take that on notice, though. Yeah, I'll take that on notice just in case I've got that wrong. But I'm pretty sure that apprenticeships and traineeships are covered just the same under the BAC.
Wonderful. And I also noticed, and when I was actually reading your profile, you talk about working with smaller employers to co-design and trial bespoke initiatives.
Yep.
Have you had any come through, or when these happen, how would they translate into a broader scheme? Do they start off bespoke and then they can actually evolve to a wider industry or wider cohort group area, or is it always just customised for that bespoke area?
Well, look, we don't really do anything that we don't think could teach us a few things about how we roll out employment services in the future. So what I would say was from the pilots that we've run that I'm very familiar with, What it helps us do is sort of narrow down what are the success factors. What are the things that we need to build into the front end of these employment pathways so that when we work with employers, we know what those are, and we also know the barriers that we're going to hit along the way and do a bit of risk mitigation. We're always looking for things that can be replicable. So the whole point of a lot of our job is to get out there and say, where's the golden scheme? How can we make this work? And look, that would be possible if every business was the same. But because we work across industries and across businesses, everything is unique. So I guess the answer is we try. So if you said to me tomorrow, I want to hire 10 staff and I want one of these employment pathways you're talking about. Well, I come armed with a whole bunch of information about, why this usually works better than that in this part of the recruitment or training process. But is that applicable to your business?
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think we've exhausted most of our questions. If anyone has any last questions they might want to put through, just please put them in. I guess I wanted to take an opportunity to thank Sally for her time and her information. You did talk about a file that would be made available that gives some of the details and frequently asked questions in boosting apprenticeship commencement schemes. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I gave Emily a little info pack. She said it was attached to the session. I'm not sure if I see the same view as everybody else, but what I can do is I can send out both that and the PowerPoint presentation to Emily, and she can just disseminate that to everybody if that works.
That's great. I've had a look at it. It does give a lot of information, so that is handy. And I think, being able to track down those employment facilitators, that will be a good idea. And you said that was in that paper as well.
Yes. So just to note, though, some of those are temporary and those positions are still being filled. So there will be a few regions that are still waiting for them to come on board, but it won't be long until they're all filled, and there's an EF for every region. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And just wrapping up, it is the final session. That is the live final session of the TMC Online, but all our sessions have been recorded and they will be available for you to view at the end of this presentation. I think give it about 10 minutes and then it will be uploaded for you to be able to view. The session polls are still open and I have been seeing them moving around while we've been talking, Sally, so people have been putting in a few different responses. They continue to be open, so please answer if you haven't answered yet. Emily said this is available below the description. So Emily has just come back and let us know that the file information, the information sheet, it's available below the session description and the speaker profile. So that's where everyone can find it. But yeah, once again, thank you very much, Sally. Really appreciate your time today. I think it was very informative and we've had some great questions come up from our audience. So to everyone.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yep, to everyone, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of TMC and enjoy the viewing. Okay.
All right. Thanks so much, Julie. Thanks everyone for attending and your questions and your interactive poll pressing today. And as I said, consider me your contact. You're very welcome to email me with questions and I will do what I can to assist.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.